Hello YouTube University students, and welcome back to Opah's Garage. And in the garage today, we're going to be working on a 2002 F250 with the 7.3 Power Stroke. Now this is a maintenance item that a lot of people don't think about, and something that you new Power Stroke owners are going to want to pay particular attention to, because even us guys that have had them for years, sometimes we forget about this. And this is an item that can leave you sitting alongside the road waiting on a tow truck. So let's get started. Okay, well, as you can see, we're over on the driver's side of the truck, and I've already removed a few items. I removed the air box, I removed the air intake tube, removed the tube that goes from the spider down to the intercooler, removed the battery, removed the battery tray. I didn't feel the need to add that to this video. I figure if you're working on your own truck, then you should be able to remove items that just require bolts to be taken out and maybe some hose clamps taken loose. If you can't figure that out, I'm sure that there are videos out there that show you how to remove those items, but I just didn't feel the need to add them to my video. But anyway, what we're looking at here, this truck is a truck that I just bought not too long ago. It's got 300,000 miles on it, and I've looked it over. It seemed to be pretty well maintained. I've been driving it around for a little bit. The other day I was in town and we were doing some shopping, got done shopping, come out, and as I was backing out of my parking spot, I had to crank her all the way to the right to get out of my parking spot. And right as I hit the full lock position, I felt something go pop, and all of a sudden my power steering got really stiff and my brakes went away. I had a very stiff brake pedal. I did have brakes, but it's one of those where you're going to stand on it with both feet if you're driving down the road. But the pop that I felt was from that right there. As you can see, I can pull that just about out, and if I lift up and turn it, I actually can pull it completely out of the power steering reservoir. And that was the pop, and that is what I'm talking about. As far as this hose right here actually is a maintenance item that probably about every 200,000 miles you ought to be looking it over, and you probably ought to be thinking about replacing it. That hose, why did I lose my brakes? That hose actually, if you follow it and you come around and come all the way over, it comes right up here and it connects right there, and it connects to your power brake booster. And then you've got another hose that comes out right here. It comes down and it goes down there and it goes into your gearbox. And then you got another line down there that goes up front to a cooler that comes back, and it comes up underneath here. And then this line here is a return line from your brake booster. It comes down, and after I get these changed out, I'll show you how to service your power steering system and flush out your power steering system. But the one other thing that I wanted to take note of is, like I said, it appears that this truck's been pretty well maintained. But when I got it all took apart, I got to looking, and I was looking at this hose right here, and boy, that hose and that hose are not the same age. You can tell that this is probably original. You can tell that this hose here is probably original, that goes into the power steering. You can tell that that hose has probably been replaced. And my question is why did they replace that? Well, more than likely it looked like this, and it either had pinholes or maybe it was spraying fluid. It's hard telling, but they replaced this line right here, and then you got this line here that looks like it does, and you got this line here that looks like it does, and you leave those two lines, and you're just asking for problems. You're just asking to be sitting alongside the road, because I've seen this blow out before. Somebody pulled out in front of me in a truck that had, I think it had 450,000 miles on it, but a guy pulled out in front of me, and I had to get on the brakes really hard, and thankfully I got wound down enough before this thing blew out that I didn't rear end that guy. But when it blew out, I was standing on it with both feet trying to get it to get stopped. And by the time I got off to the side of the road, it had basically emptied the reservoir, and I was sitting alongside the road waiting on a tow truck. This is a maintenance item. About every time you have to do any major work, you should be looking these these lines over. Once they start looking crusty and whatnot, you're going to want to replace them. They're not that expensive. The other thing is that you're going to want to look at, because of where they get routed. Let me see if I can't get over here, shine the flashlight. Right there is where this hose usually is tucked down in there, and as you can see, this is your shock tower. That's another thing that I've seen these hoses. They sit there and they rub and they rub and they rub, and then eventually they rub a hole right in it. And that's for the one that's going to the power steering reservoir. The other one, which is this hose right here that goes down into your gearbox, if you look and see, that is also right up against that shock tower. So after 200,000 miles of it rubbing and rubbing and rubbing on that shock tower, I've seen where it'll rub a hole in that line. And once again, once it starts spraying fluid out, you better hope you're somewhere that you can get off to the side of the road, or you're in town where you can go and buy the hoses. It's an easy job to do. I could have done this in the parking lot, but I figured I'd go ahead and bring it home where I got all my tools and I don't have to worry about it. But after I get done changing these lines, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to bleed your power steering system. So we'll be back in just a little bit. Okay, a couple things that I wanted to touch on while I'm doing this job. When I install these two lines down here that go into the steering gearbox, I usually make sure that once I have them good and tight, that the two metal parts of the lines have about 1/4 of an inch gap between them so that they're not touching, rubbing together, possibly rubbing a hole. The other thing is, when I route this rubber hose and the rubber hose that comes out of the power steering pump itself, from the factory they usually end up rubbing right up against the shock tower. I try to make sure that I've got them about 1/4 of an inch away from the shock tower, and then I also take a piece of rubber hose and wrap it around each one of those hoses so that they can't actually rub against the shock tower. The hose itself can't rub against the shock tower. And the reason for that is, this is the hose that I took off. I don't know if you can see that really good, but right, of course not. There we go. Right there is where it was rubbing up against the shock tower. So it wasn't going to be too much longer before that actually rubbed a hole completely through that hose, and then this hose would have been spraying power steering or automatic transmission fluid all over the place. Now these hoses, when you get them, they should have a nylon washer on the end of, or on the fittings at each end of the hose. By the way, this is the hose that goes into the power steering pump itself, and the part number from Precision is 13401095, and then the hose that goes from the brake booster down to the actual gearbox is Precision part number 13401274. I got these from O'Reilly's. I think they were right around $40, maybe $45 a piece, and I've used Precision hoses for a long time, never had any problems with them. But the only one that will not have one of those little nylon hoses or nylon washers is this one that goes down into the power steering gearbox. It will have an actual rubber O-ring on it. The other thing that you want to check is, once you get the hoses pulled out, if I can make, gotta love it when your camera battery dies right in the middle of taping. So anyway, what I was saying was, the other thing that you want to check is inside the fittings. From when you take the hoses out, you want to look and make sure that you don't have any remnants of that little back shut off, that little O-ring right there, because you're not going to get a good seal. You're going to end up with a leak, and you're going to end up being very frustrated. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about was, when you're removing and attaching these lines down here that go into the steering gearbox, one thing that comes in very handy is having little stubby wrenches. Of course, you at the very least will need to have a line wrench, but what I have found to be most useful are
crow's foot line wrenches. They can get down in there, they can get those fittings loose, they can get them tight without a whole lot of anger and frustration. So spend a couple dollars, get you some crow's foot line wrenches that you can put on the end of a 3/8 extension, and it will make your life a lot easier. So I'm going to go ahead and get this project finished up, and then I'll show you how to bleed the system. Okay, now that I got both lines all hooked up, I wanted to show you what I ended up with. As you can see, the two lines down there are fully hooked up and they're not touching each other. If you follow the lines up, you can see where they go right past the shock tower mount. If you look right there, you can see that I've got a piece of old air line that I cut and put on the shock tower mount itself, and then I'll probably put a zip tie on that just to hold it in place. But the hoses are not touching the mount, the hoses are not touching the steering shaft. They come all the way up. So, and as you can probably tell from earlier in the video, that I had to bend those lines a little bit, which is why I recommend spending a little bit of money every now and then when you're doing a job and you need to have special tools for making that job easier. I don't recommend taking those while they're hooked up and trying to bend them around. Your chances of creating a leak are probably much greater than if you take the lines back off and you actually bend them using the proper tools. So don't be afraid to spend a little bit of money and buy the proper tools and make your life easier. Okay, we've reached the end of the video, and as promised, I'm going to show you how to flush out the power steering and power brake system on these trucks. I was going to actually show you with the truck running how to do everything, but these things are loud and you can't hardly hear what I'm saying when this truck is running. So but before I get started with that, one thing that I always forget to do is remind everybody that if you get anything out of these videos, please hit the like button and the subscribe button, especially the subscribe button. I don't know how it is that I've made videos that I get over 1,000 views, and yet I still don't have, I think I've got one video with over 15,000 views, and I still don't have 1,000 subscribers. So really trying to hit that 1,000 subscriber mark. We're getting really close, so if you would hit the subscribe button, I'd really appreciate it. But back to the video. First thing you want to do is take the hose off that attaches to that nipple right there. It's the hose that's coming out of the top of the power steering reservoir, and that's your return line. So you want to take that hose off. There is one of those stupid little spring clips right there that holds that hose on. I have found that the easiest way to get those spring clips off is to spend the money and buy one of these special tools. This one's made by Mac, and I think I only paid like $40 for it through Mac Tools, so I'm sure that you could find one in an auto parts store for, I don't know, $20 or $25, but makes pulling those spring clamps off so much easier. And pretty much, I mean, they're everywhere on these vehicles anymore. There we go. That one right there. You find them on heater hoses, you find them on the radiator hoses, they're everywhere. And this thing right here makes it so much easier to get them off. So at any rate, you go ahead, you pull that hose off. And then normally I have a clear hose, but I couldn't find a clear hose, so I'm going to use this piece of old airline. But you want a hose that will fit on there kind of snug. If you can't get one that fits on the nipple snug, then you'll want to put a hose clamp or put that other clamp back on there. If you use a clear hose, it makes it a lot easier, because then you can start seeing, you can see when you start getting clean automatic transmission fluid coming through the line. But if you can't find your clear hose, which I can't find mine, then any hose that fits on that nipple and on there snug will work. Once again, if you don't have a clear hose, you want to have a clear bottle that you're pumping the automatic transmission fluid into. Top off your reservoir, start your truck up. You want to turn the wheel to the right, turn the wheel to the left, do that a couple times, hit the brakes 2 or 3 times, and then come out, top off your power steering reservoir, get back in, turn the wheel a couple times to the left, a couple times to the right, pump the brakes. After you do that about 4 times, you should be getting clean, clear automatic transmission fluid coming out of the system. Usually at that point, You can button it up if you're using a clear hose, and you can see that you're getting clean, clear automatic transmission fluid. One point I want to make is make sure that you're using Mercon. I think you can use like Mercon 4. I usually use Mercon 5 because that's what the transmission's taking these, and so that's what I usually have on hand. Do not use power steering fluid. These systems do not take power steering fluid. They use automatic transmission fluid. Anyway, if you're not using a clear hose, then I would suggest once you've done that a few times, remove that bottle, get you a nice clean clear, like a Gatorade bottle or something, and put the end of your hose down into that Gatorade bottle, and go ahead, top off your reservoir, crank it a couple times, and look at the fluid that's in the Gatorade bottle and see if it's nice and clean and clear. If it is, then you're pretty much done. All you've got to do is put your hose, your main return hose back on, top off your power steering reservoir, and you're pretty much done. So that's how you flush out the system on these, and that's something that you probably ought to do, I don't know, once every 50, 60, maybe 80,000 miles. You'll notice that your steering's a lot better, and you'll definitely notice that your brakes are a lot better. So with that being said, we're going to end this video, and until next time, keep living your best life. Get on out in the garage and fix something. Or get out in the garage and do some preventative maintenance so you don't have to fix something.